Now, the international break is nearly over, and admittedly, we do have some FA Cup action this weekend, but that doesn't stop me making some FPL content to keep you guys ticking over. So in this video, we're going to be talking about an updated version of players to buy and avoid ahead of Game Week 30. Now, I've got to start off the video by talking about a guy that's been certainly an absolute legend for me and has probably earned a place in my personal FPL Hall of Fame, and that's Chris Wood. Unfortunately, he sustained what can only be described as, a hip injury while playing for New Zealand. He managed to qualify for the World Cup, which I guess is seen as a positive by Chris Wood, but obviously the injury, negative for us FPL managers. Now, I wouldn't, most people might have heard of this already, but I wouldn't let this cause me too much panic at this stage. Yes, he's injured. Yes, he got subbed off, but, he walked the injury off. You can see in the bottom right, there's a photo of him walking off the pitch. He had a little bit of a limp, but it could just be like a knock on his hip. And also, Nottingham Forest are in FA Cup action this weekend, and I would imagine if he's either in the team or not for their FA Cup fixture, we will get some kind of update as to Chris Wood's situation. And also, as we know, the FPL deadline for Game Week 30 is on Tuesday, so we have a fair bit of time, in a week's time at the time that I'm recording this video. We've got a bit of time before then, to get more information and understand the position. So I wouldn't panic too much yet about Chris Wood, but I don't know, I feel like his levels dropped a little bit in the last few games. So his last 5 appearances, he's not even put up 1 XG. Now, I know Chris Wood is a player that always overperforms his XG, right? He's a player that gets very few chances and manages to finish pretty much all of them. But the fact that he's had less than 1 XG in 5 games certainly puts me off a little bit. And the fact that his likelihood of double game weeks are a little bit lower than other potential strikers around his price point. Now, I'm not definitely saying Chris Wood is a sell, but I do think if he is, this news comes to fruition that he is injured and out for a period of time, I wouldn't be, too concerned about having to get rid of him, if that makes sense, because I don't think his performance levels have quite been there over the last sort of 4 or 5 games. But anyway, I wouldn't panic yet on Chris Wood. We've got to wait for news. Might get something this weekend before or after, in Nuno's interviews for the FA Cup fixture. And we've still got more time even after that until the Game Week 30 deadline. All right, next up, we've got Jean-Philippe Mateta. Now, I genuinely think Mateta could well be one of the best players in the whole of FPL for the next sort of few game weeks. Fixtures he's got coming up, he's got Southampton away in Game Week 30, which is quite possibly the best fixture you could get. Obviously, Southampton at home is the best fixture you could get, but I think playing Southampton is always going to be seen as a good fixture. We've got some positive news on Mateta as well. Obviously, he sustained that awful head injury against Millwall where the goalkeeper practically kicked him in the face. Well, that was the fixtures. We've got news that Mateta has been given the all clear to play in the FA Cup. So as far as I'm concerned, he's back fit and available. I showed the fixtures there because, Crystal Palace have potentially, and it depends obviously on how the FA Cup plays out, but they potentially have 2 consecutive double game weeks. So if Crystal Palace, I think they have to beat Fulham to get this. Someone in the comments might correct me. But depending on how the FA Cup plays out, they could have 2 consecutive double game weeks of 32 and 33, right? Man City, Newcastle, 32. Bournemouth, Arsenal, 33. So 4 fixtures in 2 game weeks. And leading up to that, they have Southampton away, which is pretty much the best fixture on a single game week you can get. Then Brighton after that, which is obviously Crystal Palace's big derby. And that game does perpetually finish sort of 1-1. But I do still think Mateta is, can I say it? Next to maybe Erling Haaland and Isak, probably the best striker in the game. I would probably go that far to say that. The form he was in pre-injury was pretty fantastic. And, I don't think he's been out for all that long to suggest that he's going to be starting from, absolute square zero. I mean, the guy's been, I believe, training with a bandage on for a couple of weeks at this point. It's just obviously they didn't want to risk him in a game with the nature of his injury. So I think he's kept fit, still training. Yeah, I really like him as an option. I genuinely think he's going to be one of the best strikers in the game going forwards, particularly with 2 potential double game weeks. Another couple of Crystal Palace players that I've got in my mind are Dean Henderson and Munoz. And again, thinking of the potential 2 consecutive double game weeks, I think these 2 players could be the 2 best players in their position. So Henderson, I think, providing those 2 double game weeks come off, could well be the best goalkeeper in the game for that period of time. I have no doubt about it. You know, I always say this about goalkeepers in FPL. People got annoyed at me when I said it too much, so I kind of stopped. But the best goalkeepers in FPL, they keep like an average amount of clean sheets and they make consistent saves. In Dean Henderson, he's kept 9 clean sheets in 28 games, which I'd say, you know, nearly double digits is pretty average. But he's made 2.82 saves per 90, which is pretty much, you know, saves bonus points every game he's played. And he's got the 2 potential double game weeks, as we know. So I think if those double game weeks come off, which we'll obviously know before the game week 31 deadline, I think Dean Henderson is the best goalkeeper in the game. And the same applies to Munoz. Now, Munoz, if you count up his attacking returns plus his clean sheet, he's got, 8 attacking returns and 9 clean sheets. So that's, in total, 17 returns from 27 starts. I think that's pretty spectacular. You know, if you picked a striker, for example, that got, say, 10 goals, 7 assists in 17 goals in 27 starts. Let's word it that way because it sounds a bit better. You know, if you got a striker that scored 17 goals in 27 starts, you'd be pretty happy with them, right? And you've got a defender at 5 million that's kind of putting up those numbers at the moment. And yeah, just genuinely, same as Dean Henderson with goalkeepers, I think Munoz could be the best defender in the game for that kind of period of time with those numbers in mind, the fixtures in mind, how attacking he is. You know, Crystal Palace decent defensively as well. I would expect some clean sheets in those coming games. I really like Munoz as an option. And I think he's probably the best defender in the game, should those 2 double game weeks come off. Next up, I've got a little bit more injury news on a player that's pretty popular in the game, 22.5% ownership. I unfortunately bought him myself ahead of blank Game Week 29 with the Game Week 29 fixture and the 30 fixture against Leicester in mind. How attacking he has been this season, you know, he's probably has been City's best player this season. Well, one of the best players from this season from at least an attacking perspective. Now, I just don't think teams can deal with a left back that can do what Gvardiol can do. You know, his threat from set pieces, the runs he makes into the opposition box, his ability to shoot from outside the box. You know, he's a really, really good attacking player. And I think those abilities from a left back, with all the other talent that Man City have in their team, I just think defenders don't know how to deal with him. That's how he's gotten his attacking returns. Anyway, that's my thoughts on Gvardiol. Unfortunately, he does have a possible hamstring injury that he sustained playing for Croatia. However, you can see a tweet from FPL Focal here. I've used a lot of Twitter for this, or X for this news, because that seems to still be the best kind of source of updated and, you know, I've collated here trustworthy sources in my mind. So Gvardiol was subbed off in the 106th minute. He jogged off the pitch looking fine. You know, he might have a hamstring injury, but if he managed to jog off the pitch, played 106 minutes, I think he probably is fine. It's just a case of maybe a little hamstring tightness, little niggle, you know, and the fact that, again, the FPL deadline for Game Week 30 is on Tuesday. So we've got, you know, basically a whole week before we have to decide our teams. I think that's a week potentially for an injury like that to completely heal, to be honest. I've had hamstring niggles. I swim, you know, lift weights. I get hamstring niggles quite often because I'm a sprinter. It's the nature of sprinting. You get regular hamstring injuries. If you just rest for a week, most hamstring issues completely go away. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on Gvardiol. Again, I wouldn't panic too much. I'm just updating you on his status. One other thing I wanted to talk about was the Game Week 30 captaincy. Now, I had a little bit of stick in the comments on my last video where I spoke, well, my transfer plans video where I said I'm not really too worried about not owning Erling Haaland and that I thought Salah was the best captain. There was quite a few, I'm not sure if this is the consensus amongst my viewers, but you guys can let me know in the comments. A lot of people were suggesting that Haaland is a lot better as a captain than Salah is, and well, quite frankly, I just disagree. I think, yes, the fixture for Haaland is better, but when you compare the two players, the points they've scored this season, the form that they're in, how well their respective teams are playing, I just think Salah's head and shoulders above Haaland. You know, the only thing that Haaland has over Salah this week is the fact that his fixture is arguably slightly better. I wouldn't say Everton, in fact, Everton have regressed defensively under David Moyes than they were under Sean Dyche. It's just the fact that they're playing more attacking football and scoring more goals, which is why, you know, they've bounced back a little bit. But under Sean Dyche, their expected goals conceded was better than it is now under David Moyes. Obviously, that's the nature of Sean Dyche's football, right? But for me, I think obviously Leicester is the better fixture, but I don't think there's enough in it where I would categorically say Haaland is a better captain. You can see here I've got Fantasy Football Hub expected points, FPL review expected points. Both have Mo Salah on top. It's quite close on fantasy or FPL review, sorry, 0.1 expected points in it. But if you were to adjust the expected minutes, that might go up by 0.2. And Fantasy Football Hub have got it on Salah as well. Just for me, I think Salah is clear as captain. It's just my opinion though. Let me know in the comments what you think. So just revisiting the fixtures, this is a blank and double game weeks view that doesn't show game week 30 and 31, right? But I think any transfer decisions you're making now, you have to consider the double and blank game weeks coming up, right? You can't, in my mind, you can't just use transfers at the moment on players with game week 30 and 31 in mind, because if you're wildcarding in 31, FPL gives you the ability to roll transfers now. So any transfer that you save, that you don't use before your wildcard, you can roll over to next week. So kind of a 1 week punt transfers before a wildcard, they don't, in my mind at least, they don't really make sense anymore, particularly if you're kind of happy with your team as it is at the moment. So in reality, if you're making transfers, you probably should be worried more about the blanks and doubles we got coming up, right? And there's one team in addition to Crystal Palace that stands out to me, and that's Newcastle. They've obviously got a double game week in 32. That's confirmed. So the Crystal Palace confirmed, Newcastle confirmed. Those are the 2 confirmed double game weeks we have so far, both occurring in 32. I've spoken about 3 Crystal Palace players, Mateta, Henderson and Munoz. I chucked Sarr, maybe Eze in there as well, but I wanted to focus on those 3. For me, for Newcastle at the moment, there are only 2 that I'm genuinely excited by. Anthony Gordon, I think he's got an injury at the moment and suspended. So, you know, there's a lot to, well, I guess put you off about Anthony Gordon, but he could be back come game week 32, to be fair. But it leaves for me really only sort of one midfield option from Newcastle, and that's Jacob Murphy. And I would say if you're not wildcarding in 31 or whatever, he might be an option. You know, he's got Brentford at home next, Leicester away after that, Man United, Crystal Palace in 32. 2 goals in his last 5 appearances, looking sort of relatively dangerous. Yeah, I don't mind him. I think he could be a good option. And at 5 million, I mean, those are the kind of numbers you'd expect for a player of that price, I guess. Next up, we've got Isak. Now, obviously, he's a fantastic option in FPL. No, absolutely no question about it. But a lot of, well, I'd imagine quite a few viewers of my channel pre-Game Week 29 would have sold Isak. You know, I think, trying to remember back, was he a doubt before the game week? Or there was something, you know, potentially, he had his potential knee injury, didn't he? So a lot of managers would have sold him considering, you know, they wanted Haaland with the potential double game weeks that Man City have, the fact that Haaland could be a captain option this week. But if I sold Isak in game week 29, I'd be a little bit worried about that now because he's got Brentford and Leicester coming up, a double game week in 32. You know, that knee injury, I think, is just something that's going to niggle him all season, basically. Apparently, it's an issue that he's been managing for the last sort of year or so, and he trains in like a knee band and stuff. It's just something that he's managing, basically. Maybe he gets surgery for it over the summer, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you can't look past Isak, can you? I know I said, you know, looking at the fixtures, right? So we've got potential double game weeks, obviously, for Crystal Palace, and a confirmed one in 32. Confirmed double game week in 32 for Newcastle. Potential double game week in 33 for Man City, although it's a likely one based on their likelihood of proceeding in the FA Cup. All of that combined, I think the best 3 strikers in FPL right now are Haaland, Isak, and Mateta. And I deliberately haven't spoken about Haaland in this video because, well, I think he's a bit Marmite, isn't he? I don't personally think if you don't have the cash, I wouldn't rip up my team to get him. That's kind of my thoughts on Haaland, really. I didn't really think I need to talk about him too much. But yeah, anyway, those are my thoughts on Isak anyway. I think he's amongst the 3 best forwards in the game, looking at the game weeks we've got coming up. And I think if I got rid of him in 29 with Brentford at home coming up, and obviously all those, I think I'd regret it. You know, you probably lost a bit of value in him as well. That's just my thoughts, of course. All right, well, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that and found it useful. I feel a little bit rusty for this one. It's been about a week since I made an FPL video. And yeah, it all feels a bit new to me. I had a little week off, went away to Florence for the weekend, which was a mixed bag. I got really ill on one of the days. I'll spare you the details, but yeah, I was out of action for one of the days on my holidays. I'm still kind of recovering from it now. But anyway, you know, we're back with some FPL content. I'm excited to be back in my room, sat in front of camera, talking about FPL. It's the greatest pleasure, in my opinion. Anyway, yeah, if you enjoyed the video, please leave me a like rating. Let me know in the comments. You know, I asked you for a few thoughts there. Captaincy, who you think the best strikers in the game are, etc. So let me know in the comments on your thoughts on those things. And if you haven't already and want to stick around, watch more of me, you can subscribe to the Golden Goal channel. Should be just there on your screen. Thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you in my next video.